Hi everyone and welcome. This is Meet NVivo, the Sleepless student, how to manage your data and work smarter with NVivo 11 for Windows. Although it says the Sleepless student, having been a student and also on the professor-instructor side of things, there are a lot of sleepless nights for instructors and professors as well. It's my pleasure to be with you today. My name is Stuart Robertson. I am an NVivo consultant and trainer. I've been working with NVivo now for 15 years. I started using it during my doctoral work. I did used it for both the literature review and for the actual dissertation research. I did a case study looking at the social and cultural influences that come into play when creating an alternative educational environment. Since then, I've used NVivo for both my own research as well as helping a number of others from dissertation to corporate research in using NVivo to help organize and analyze unstructured non-numeric data. So as we're going through this, I come at this from a very practical standpoint. Today's session is focused on NVivo 11 for Windows. The NVivo 11 for Windows has three different versions. It has the Starter, the Pro, and the Plus. Today, I will actually be demonstrating in the Plus version, but much of what I will be doing, in fact, all of it, I think, for today, will be both available in Pro and Plus, and some will be available in Starter. Starter gives you the ability to analyze text, run basic queries, and have basic visualizations. Pro builds on that so that you can analyze more types of data, do advanced queries, more charts, diagrams, and maps. And you can also bring teamwork into it in situations where that might be a component. And finally, with Plus, again, you can do everything that's in Pro, but you will have the addition of automated insights and social network analysis. So those are two features that are in the Plus version, although neither will be highlighted in today's presentation, just so that you know. There are a large number of file types that NVivo 11 for Windows can work with. Anything from traditional text-based data, looking at audio, video, PDFs. You can also work with web-based data via InCapture, an add-on that comes with NVivo, allowing you to capture web pages as PDFs. You can also work with LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter data as you're looking at it, as well as bibliographic software. You can export files from Zotero, Mendeley, RefWorks, and EndNote, and be able to bring those files into your projects. When you're thinking about NVivo, there's a number of ways that you can work with your data, and also a number of visualizations. Sometimes we don't think about being able to see our data in a format that may make it easier for us, especially those of us who are more visual, to be able to start to make sense of it. So things such as word clouds, or word trees, which are available in all three versions of NVivo for Windows. There's also the framework matrix, hierarchical diagrams, as well as the explore diagram, which can help us look for potential connections across our different sources and different information. The agenda for today, we'll talk about organizing folders, smart reading tools, nodes and coding, other data types. We'll talk about how they can play a factor in the work that you do. And finally, talking about the framework matrix, what it is, and how it can be a very useful tool, especially when you're looking at the information or the data that you've collected and you're sliding over into the writing portion of a particular project. Working with information in NVivo 11, of course, you always start by gathering the information together, importing it into NVivo. You can then explore and analyze that information or data, and then visualize and share some of your insights from the information that you've gathered and that you've worked with. So at this point, I'm going to step into NVivo itself. So allow me here momentarily to swap screens out and bring you into NVivo for Windows. This is NVivo for Windows Plus. The workspace in all three is very similar. It's the same basic structure. For all three versions, the workspace was modeled after Outlook. So if you've used Outlook for your calendar, contacts, email, etc., you actually have a foundational understanding of how the workspace functions. Over on the left-hand side is the navigation view. Here's where you can organize the materials that you bring into your project, as well as moving out to other parts of the software depending on what your needs are. You'll notice we have a ribbon format. We also have an area later will become known as the list view, where project items will be able to be accessed, listed and accessed from there. And later on, we'll introduce the detail view. In today's presentation, the premise is that regardless if we're working on taking classes, if we're working on specific projects, dissertations, or I would say even for professional literature, when you have your professional readings that you're working with, NVivo gives you a chance to help organize and analyze that information and be able to access it far more efficiently than in a traditional, say, paper and pencil structure. For example, I remember having many different articles to read, being able to highlight in those different articles, and then when I wanted to go back, I may have articles in one place or another and finding them and looking for where they interact with each other, where they cross over. NVivo gives you a place where you can bring all of that together in one location, be able to work with that, code it, highlight it, and break it apart into different topics, and then be able to see where information from those different articles or sources overlap with each other. The information on a specific topic, theme, or idea or concept, being able to see how it's talked about in different sources. And I thought about this, especially thinking back to my doctoral work. I really wished I had had it when I was doing the classes leading up to the dissertation, because when I got to my exams right before, it definitely would have been a plus to truly have had all of that organized in one place like NVivo. So in this case, thinking about it in terms of professional literature you might be working with, or materials for courses, or even a paper that you're going to write, you want to think about organizing that data. And everything that you bring into NVivo goes into the internals folder. You want to think about how you're going to be using that material in order to be able to structure it in the most efficient way. The example I'm using for today is actually some articles and research material that I use in another part of my professional life. I also function as an adjunct faculty working with undergraduate pre-service elementary and early childhood educators, particularly in the areas of science and math. So I took some of my own professional material that I would be using and organized it either as the instructor trying to keep up with my professional literature, or as one of my students might structure it over the course of our work together. If I'm looking at course materials, one of the suggestions I will often make is to create subfolders based on the courses that you have. In this example, one of the courses I'll be teaching shortly is elementary science teaching. So what I've done is I've, under my course materials, created a folder for that course, and underneath it, an area for articles or papers, even videos. I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. I have an example to share with you about how that can play into this as well. In the articles folder, I've actually gone and imported some of the articles that are either references for me, or these may also be articles that I would share with my students. By doing this, I can open up any or all of these articles right here inside of my project, and I can begin to work with or code or pull information from any of these articles. One of the things, of course, that strikes me is the fact that in the past, where I might have simply been able to pull up one of these here, been able to highlight some information that I thought might be important. In here, not only can I highlight it, but then I can set it aside into a node, so that when I'm ready to look at, say, the issues of elementary science instruction, I can have a node where I have highlighted and collected all of those different pieces from all of my different sources, be able to open that node up and see how that concept has been reflected across all of those different sources. So for example, let me go here for a moment and pull this up. I want to just pull out a quick piece here. So I may want to, at this point, go over to my node section. And basically, a node is just a holder. It's a bin where I can put information in that I found inside of my various sources. So if I'm looking at the idea of skills through science and technology, I can highlight that data, and in my nodes area, one way I can get things started would be simply to drag and drop it, or drag over into this node area, and I'll create a new node, skills within science, instruction. I can click OK, and I've created a node. So that I can open that up. And what NVivo does is it takes the data that I have coded and it will gather it. When I put it into a node, it will organize it by the source that it came from. It will then show me the data that I have, or information that I have highlighted from that particular source, so that as my semester goes on, or my work on a paper or project goes on, I can start to see how this concept has been manifesting itself across different sources that I've encountered. When I'm looking at this, it tells me the number of references. So right now I only have one reference. The percentage coverage lets me know how much of that source is present in this node at this point. So right now I've got 0.23%. I've got a very, very small piece of this article in this node. Some people will, of course, use that to try to identify where their rich information might be brought in, where it can, where they might want to go to when they're writing or reading about a particular topic. And so that's a great space. It's a great space to keep all of this information in. Just to show you a sample one, here's the role of self-efficacy. And I did some coding ahead of time in the role of self-efficacy. And I can see that there are 2 sources represented. There are 12 different references so far. And I can start to read the little snippets of data, and I can clean them up as I go through. With this piece, I can also then click on this label, and it will bring me back into that particular source so that I can see in context in full context, what it was that spoke to me about that particular topic. So this is a great way, the nodes are a great way to start to organize the topics that you are interested in. One of the things, a question that sometimes comes up is, can I code data or can I move data into more than one node? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, you can. So that I can, for example, there's a piece of data here that I have placed in under the subject area of science, but I've also put it under, in this case, I believe it was student engagement. So that way, if I ever wanted to find examples of student engagement, but science specific as opposed to perhaps some of my math work, I've got the ability to do just that. Along those same lines, one of the suggestions I would make, if you are approaching NVivo in this manner, would be to create, I can right click and create a new node here called important quotes. And as I'm going through my readings, whenever I come across something that I think might be important later on, if I'm trying to write an essay, write a paper, get ready for a comprehensive exam, or when I'm working with my own data in research, that quotes from participants that I think are key to helping illustrate some of my points I'd like to make, I code them to that important quotes as well as whatever topics they are talking about. Because later on, when I'm getting to the point of writing, I can use something called a coding query and ask NVivo to go through my data, my coded data, coded information here, and show me all of the data coded at a given concept and coded at important quotes. So as I'm writing, NVivo pulls together all of the important quotes I found along the way that went with that particular topic. And I'm not flipping through all these different articles to find where I've highlighted or made little notes to myself. That being said, a couple of other things that I want to talk about that are great during the course of working with within a given article or pieces of information here. You can also make notes to yourself. That's one of the things a lot of people aren't as familiar with. So if I wanted to identify something here, looking at the research question or inquiry-based science activities on Saturday Science. So, and here it is looking on families that we're bringing in. I may want to make myself a little note here. Actually, let me just pull a piece. And one of the things that I can do is I can take a piece of data, highlight it, and create something called an annotation. Okay, so this is a specific program. For one community. And I can make notes for myself so that later on, if I come back into this article and my annotations are turned off, I can see that there's some blue highlighting here. It lets me know that I've created an annotation. And if I click my annotations and I click on the highlighted text, in the bottom section here, it will show me any of the notes I've made about that particular passage, what it was that I wanted to remember. So in a lot of the presentations we don't talk about annotations as much, if at all. But this is a time period where you may want to make little notes in the margin. You can do that. It's done in the form of annotations. You can also keep notes for yourself. A lot of times you're reading articles and you have a notebook and you're putting that information in. Well, in NVivo, I can be working with the idea of memos. So if I'm looking at investigating pre-service teachers, here I can, I've created a memo with the same title, and I can open that up. And so, for example, I'm just going to use a quick keyboard shortcut that I really like, the Control, Shift, and T, which puts the date and time. So that's Control, Shift, and T. And that way I can make a note about, I am wondering how generalizable this is. Look for evidence of this concept. And that way, notes that I'm taking, thoughts that I have, even if I'm thinking ahead to the writing portion, I can capture my thoughts and ideas inside this memo, which is right now linked to the the article. So if I'm looking in the memo here, I can go ahead and open the memo. I can open the linked item, and I'm right back there. And I can have both of them open at the same time and be able to work on that. So a lot of the things that you're doing in traditional ways that we've normally worked with information and organization, it is here. The notes in the margin, the ability to have that notebook and that idea to be able to look into that data. Now, that being said, there's some other tools that we didn't traditionally have. So for example, one of the tools that I use, especially if I'm coming to a new article, and I want to give myself sort of a sense of what might be there, is to use the word frequency. I can use the word frequency to look across a given item or a number of items if I wish. So let's say I was about to read one of my articles. I could go and look at that article. And I'll take teaching science and mathematics here. And maybe I want to look at the top 100 words. I'll go ahead and run my query. And I can start to see, okay, we have things about questioning teachers, conceptual ideas, using questions. I can see some of these key words, and already my mind is starting to activate some of these areas so that I know what I'm about to look for when I go into that article. Again, this is also when I can provide a word cloud. If I'm, again, more of a visual person and I want to see some of those options there, and there are different formats that I can produce it in depending on my needs. The other reason I wanted to do this was you may have noticed that I created a folder for papers. So if I've written papers along the way, or I'm writing a paper, I can put my paper into my project. I can import it as a Word document into my project. And then I can run a word frequency and create a word cloud and be able to have that and get a sense of what I have captured in my paper here, which is also a great thing that I could then use if I'm presenting that paper, or might be a good material in the front of it for potential readers to be aware of. So I mean, don't sell yourself short. The things that you do can come in here too, and you'll be able to use some of these tools to even explore your own thinking about different ideas or topics or how you're expressing. What's interesting too sometimes is looking at a word cloud and looking at the keywords that you've focused on and realize that there might be something that isn't there. It might be a little cue to go back and say, let me look at this section. I think I might need to strengthen some work around this topic. So again, it's not just how to pull information from it, but how to use these tools to make the work that you do better. Right. Keeping that in mind, one of the other pieces that I do love to do, especially with my text-based work, the text search query. And this is one where there may be a particular concept or that's associated with a keyword that I want to find inside of my sources. So I may even say it's getting towards the end of a semester and I'm writing a paper, and I know that one of the things I have to talk about is inquiry-based science. So I might even just start out with the word inquiry. and look for stemmed words so I can find other forms of it. Run that query and see which articles talk about that topic, how many references I have around that topic in each of these articles. And one tool that I absolutely love to use is the word tree, because it allows me to see how a word is being used across multiple data sources. It's also showing me if there are certain keywords coming right before or right after it that might sort of send up flags in my head to say, okay, I was thinking about this, but now I also need to think about it in terms of something else. What's nice about this, if I look at inquiry science, I can right-click and run another text search query, and NVivo will show me where the phrase inquiry science is being used. And I have another word tree that I can start building off of. And if I decide that these results are ones that I would like to save, I certainly have that ability. I can spread the coding so I can capture a little bit more than just one or two words. And I can run the query. Oh, I apologize. It decided that it didn't want to run that query for me today. My apologies. So let me just go right back into that. And what it will do is it will allow me to store that information, store that in a node, so that I have that information to call upon and work with as I go forward. So let me open up this piece here. And in this case, a lot of this is when I've started working with some of getting the ideas organized, getting them into place. One of the other options, for example, I may have a video. I may have a video of a lecture. I may have, in this case, there was actually a YouTube video. So what I did is I went out to YouTube, and using InCapture, and that's an add-on that comes with NVivo, using InCapture, I actually linked up to that video so that I could watch that video inside of my project. And as I was working with it, and I press play here, I can be watching the video and I can be taking notes about it. So for example, in this case, I took a piece of the timeline. I'll just show you what I did here. And I inserted a row and I made notes and was able to then, if I wanted to see which part of the timeline I was looking at, when I clicked on it, I could play the transcript media and be able to watch the information that was there. What's nice about this too is that I can take this information and I can code a section of the video. So if I go back here to my nodes for a moment, and one of them was student engagement, when I go into this node, I can see that I've coded on the timeline, and there's a video tab here that will show me all of the places that I've coded. And when I'm within the node, if I press play, NVivo will only play for me the sections of the video that I've actually coded. So let me stop here for a second. So I wanted to mention this because this is something that doesn't come up very often. But when you think about podcasts, because you can capture audio, you can capture video, you can capture pictures. Or what I like to also mention is handwritten notes or handwritten sketches. You can scan those in as pictures and be able to code sections of it, be able to make notes about it just like I did here. Um, and have that uh, information available for you. So this is why I like to have people think a little bit beyond. The other couple of pieces that I want to show, and I'm going to close this project that I've been working on and actually open up our sample project because there's a couple of other tools that I want to share with you. One of them is a matrix coding query. And the matrix coding query is one that would allow me to look across a number of different topics and be able to see where there's maybe some similarities or differences, for example, in the coding. So let's say that I want to look at some of the internals that I've captured here. I might have some news articles. I might have a piece from my literature and bring that information in. And I want to see what topics were talked about in which of these articles and what topics they overlapped in. So what I can do is I can then go into the nodes that I've created that hold the data that I've coded. And I might be able to, I'll pull out some of just a sampling of these nodes here. And I'll throw in policy management. And NVivo will go through and create a matrix for me. In the matrix, I can see which articles talked about which topics. And if I double click on a cell, I can actually see the references from that particular source. I can start to see, like for example, if I want to see peaks and valleys and where do I have my high and low coding amounts, I can do that. I can look at using some shading. I can start to see if there are places where these articles overlap with each other, so what were topics where that might be. This is something I use especially, I mentioned this in the literature review Meet NVivo that we do, because this is a way where I can create cases for my authors or take the articles that I have and see which authors talk about which topics that make it so I know who my go-to authors are when I'm talking about certain topics and pieces. So I just like to be able to mention that. Also, when I do the matrix, it does create a graph for me, if I'm a more visual person. And any of these visuals I can export to be able to use and drop in a presentation that I may be giving. Another piece that I wanted to talk about, especially when you're thinking about what sources should you turn to talk about or write about a certain topic. Under the Explore, we do have the Explore diagram, so that if I wanted to be writing about the concept in this example project of real estate development, I can select that node, turn on my Explore diagram, click on the Explore diagram here, and NVivo will show me all of the project items that are connected to that topic. In this case, I'm really most interested in the sources I could use to go to. and I can start to see the various sources very quickly that I can go to and know that I have coding for that particular topic. Again, this is great doing a meta-analysis of maybe current literature, which authors are talking about what topics, which authors are here, or thinking about when you're writing a paper and the focus of your paper is going to be this. What are the sources that you've read that you've actually coded to? So you may have read 50 sources, but only 20 of them, talk about that particular piece, so that I can have that information. The last thing that I wanted to show within the software was something called a framework matrix. It's in the sources area, and a framework matrix allows you, if you've created cases, which are basically just nodes that the information inside of those nodes is built around your unit of analysis. So it could be an article, it could be an author. You might collect 3 or 4 articles from the same author and put them in a case. And what the framework matrix does is it lets you create a matrix. So let's say I was interested in thoughts on the economy. I created a framework matrix in which I could have my authors. Each row could be a different author. Each column could be a different topic under that concept that I'm looking at. And when I create it and I auto summarize, what NVivo does is it will show me the data that I've coded at that particular, from that particular source at that particular node. I will actually see the data that I've coded. I also have the ability at this point, if there is something where I wanted to make note to self here, I actually have the ability to be able to directly type in notes. One suggestion I do make is to change the color so that you'll know where you've interjected some pieces here. By the way, you can also code not only in the sources, you can code in the nodes. You can code in the memos as well, so that you could code information from the memos to be able to have it inside of the nodes to be able to look at as well. But in this case, when I'm looking at what I've gathered, so if in Barbara's case, if I put my memo and her article, then when I fill this, I'll be able to see what I've coded from her article and what I've coded from my own memo. And then I can right-click and I can export. I can export this framework matrix out to Excel and be able to share it with a colleague that maybe doesn't have NVivo. And they could give me feedback. I could also then use it as my guide as I'm starting to write graphic organizer. My brain just hiccuped there for a minute. I can use it as a graphic organizer to guide my writing. Again, let me go ahead back here for a moment and share a few other things. I know that we are reaching the top of the hour, but I do want to be able to share this information with you. These are some key things that I think are just great tools for learning and organization in general. Some things that I'd like to share. One of the things that I do like to mention, there is a 14-day free trial. So as you're starting a new semester, if you think this is something you'd like to explore, by all means, download the 14-day free trial. If you're using it and you like it and you later then look to access a license, any of the work that you've done in the trial will be able to be opened up in the full license, so you won't lose anything. And the full license is just that. It's the full license. Nothing is held back. So you can try everything out. There are discounted student licenses. There are perpetual full licenses that are available. If there's Teams working, there's NVivo for Teams. There's also an enterprise license for organizations. There are a number of universities that do have enterprise license agreements. So if you're interested, I would check with your IT department. They might be able to let you know if you have access to NVivo through a license that may already be on campus. Couple of other things. As I mentioned, if you want to find out more about specific tools, and we have, QSR has a YouTube channel where you can watch videos, tutorials about how to use certain, for example, the matrix coding query, walk you through that. The NVivo Knowledge Center, and I do have the address there, and that's why I want to make sure that I share these. It's on the QSR International website. It's the NVivo Knowledge Center. It has many of the webinars that we've done, not just Meet NVivo, but some guest speakers that we've had come in on specific topics that you may be interested in and can help you broaden your thinking around NVivo as a tool. There are user communities from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter to an online forum where people from all over the world, NVivo users from all over the world, are asking questions, sharing ideas, sharing answers. The online help documents are fantastic. Instead of having a bound manual type piece, all of the work went into putting these pages online so that you can, some of them have videos, they all have links to other places, but they're really also very well written step-by-step instructions on how to use many of these tools that we've seen today, as well as to just think about using NVivo in non-traditional ways. Free webinars like Meet NVivo. I know that there's one coming up on mixed methods, that we do one on using it to publish faster, using it as a literature review, social data, visualization. So pieces like this that can help give you other ideas that may enrich the work that you're already doing. Okay. I am going to, for those of you who do have to step out, I do want to thank you for being with me. I will be back momentarily and go into the question panel to be able to answer some questions. But for those of you who do need to go, I do want to thank you for being with me. I appreciate your being here. All right, let me go ahead in here to the piece. Okay, the question about the coverage, and I did have a chance to answer that. A question came in if talking about the difference between Pro and Plus, in the Plus version, that they heard, excuse me, about the automatic textual coding, and they want to know if it's true. For once I can actually say yes, it is. Oh, pardon me here. Let me come back into NVivo. One of the options that you have, if you do have text-based data, so for example, if I have a number of interviews here that I might want to look at. And let's say I have not done any coding at all. Under the Analyze tab, there is an auto code feature. And one of the options, there is an algorithm that will review that data and provide you with a list of possible themes and data that would be coded to those themes. So if I'll go ahead and click next here. Again, it is an algorithm. It definitely is an algorithm. So when you're looking at some of this information, you'll see that here's a series of potential topics. If I take a look at, I can unclick anything that I think may not be pertinent to what I'm doing. And when I finish, what NVivo does is initially it will show me a matrix of which of my sources talked about which of those topics. It will also create nodes for me based on those identified potential themes. All that being said, it's great if you have a large amount of data that you're trying to get through very quickly. You would want to review the results to see some of what's there, and it does need some cleanup. As you know, again, it is an algorithm versus the human being, so there are things that will slip through. But at least that option, I wanted to just confirm that that option is there. I don't always use it for looking initially at themes. Sometimes what I will actually do is after I'm done coding, I will run it to see if there's any potential themes that I missed. And then I'll go back and check it out and look at the data that's there. So that's another way that you definitely can use that piece. So it doesn't always have to be something from the beginning. So here's a hierarchical diagram of the different topics or themes and sub-themes. The data that I looked at and the sub-themes, and if I come over to the nodes piece here, auto-coded themes, I actually have the nodes that were created around that particular thing. Again, that is an option. It's only available in the Plus. There's also there's one for thematic analysis, and there's one for sentiment. There are algorithms for each of those. Again, let me cancel that out and come back to my questions here. Importing videos from YouTube using encoding. Okay, encoding. It's actually NVivo. Thank you for asking. I certainly can talk about that. InCapture actually comes with NVivo, and it works with Google Chrome and Internet Explorer. What it does, there is a tab up here, there is an icon that will allow me to capture a web page as a PDF. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, I can also capture as a data set, which means I capture not only the tweets, but any of the metadata, username, tweet type, and all of that information along with it. And in the case of YouTube, it creates a link to the YouTube file so that I can actually watch the YouTube video from within NVivo, be taking my notes about it. So as long as that video is available on YouTube, you will have access to it in NVivo. Again, for legal reasons, unless the author of the video has made it downloadable, you wouldn't. That's why we don't download it. We simply link to it so that we stay within the legal aspects of that. So it's called InCapture, CAPTURE, InCapture for NVivo. And it comes with NVivo. If it wasn't installed at first, you certainly can go out to the QSR website and download the Internet Explorer version from there, or the Google Chrome store. You can get the Google Chrome version, and it is free. Okay, so let me. Under the a question came in under the function of the analyze feature. So let me go back into NVivo here for just a moment. Analyze mostly talks about when you are creating either links, like I did the memo link. If you're coding, that is there. Uncode intersecting. So it's not like in SPSS where you go and you run a statistical analysis and you get the results. It's what this is doing, possibly with the exception of the thematic coding. But with this, it's where you go for coding and links and be able to start to put those pieces. Let's see, question came in. I just want to make sure, because I know that we are running out of time. If you're, how do you differentiate between annotations and memos? Very easily. On one level, an annotation is like a note in the margin, where a memo is capturing your own thoughts about things. Probably the more practical difference is if what you're about to type you may want to code, put it in a memo. You can code in memos, you cannot code annotations. Okay, you cannot code annotations. So think about annotations as the little note in the margin, whereas the memo is where you're going to do the probably your metacognitive piece, thinking about your thinking about what this all means. That is the true differentiation between them. Okay. Talking about one of the problems, concepts and constructs from these different nodes. If you just highlight everything and assign it to a node, it's hard to dig it out. It's also hard to have so many nodes at times. When you think about coding, think about, I know some people say, oh, I have to code at least a sentence, or I have to code at least a paragraph. Really, you want to code a unit of meaning, and that may only be a piece of a sentence. And what I normally suggest is that you code enough information, just enough, that you can quickly see why you put it in that node. If you need to be able to see it in further context, you always have that link back to the data in the original pieces, so that you may want to be able to do that. And I do realize our time is up, but I just want to try to answer a couple of quick things. A quick question came in about, how can you work with someone else without NVivo Teams? In the standalone NVivo, you actually can copy a project. You can make a copy of your project and share it with another person. You can make multiple copies, share it with multiple people. They can then be working on the project on their own NVivo. You would all need to be on the same version, meaning NVivo 10 or NVivo 11, Windows or Mac. And one of the nice things is when you want to bring everybody's work together, under the Data tab, you can actually merge one project into another. And you have the ability to do that. In the content area, in the knowledge area, the web page that I had up a few moments ago, there's actually, I believe, a video I'm working with NVivo and Teams with the standalone version. Um, one last question, and I do apologize. There was so many great questions here. With integrating with bibliographic software, which sometimes is important within the classes that you may be doing, if you have notes that you've taken inside of the software, like Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote, RefWorks, when you export, you'll export the file out of those bibliographic softwares, and make sure that you export the notes. That's usually an option. And then when you import it into NVivo, those notes that were exported will come in as memos. They'll come in as memos. So that's what you want to make sure is when you're exporting out of the bibliographic software, that you're exporting the memos so that you can then bring them in when you come out. All right. Well, again, I do apologize. I was not able to quite get to every question, but I tried to get to as many as I could. I do want to thank you so much for being with me today. I do hope that some of you will join me in future presentations, and I might be able to get to answer some of the questions I didn't get to today. But once again, thank you so much for being here. And you should be getting information on linking to reviewing this, being able to see the video again, as well as the PowerPoint presentation I used at the beginning. So once again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.